computer. Okay. Sorry about that. Had some business to take care of. Write that on my contacts. All right, we're in 3rd John. Hope everybody got the test today. Need it by next week. This is class 11, right? All right. We got to verse number 2. We were talking about verse number 2 when we had to stop and give you a little bit of review. 4 times the word beloved is used in this book. Well beloved, we're going to call that beloved. Verse 1, verse 2, beloved. Verse 5, he says beloved, and verse 11, he says beloved. That thou mayest prosper, here is then a good road, good long road, and to have a prosperous journey or trip. And he prayed for him that he may prosper and be in good health, even as his soul prosper. And so we talked about what that meant, prosper financially or being health free of disease. And so we then need to go on and talk about how one's soul is doing ought to be the rule by which he judges prosperity in wealth and health, and not the other way around.
Can you say that one more time? I'm sorry.
Okay. How one's soul is doing ought to be the rule by which he judges prosperity and wealth and health, not the other way around. This is the standard then by which one may determine how rich one may safely become. You remember the rich young ruler? Mark chapter 10 and verse 17 came to Jesus and asked him, what must I do to inherit eternal life? And Jesus had that conversation with him that he'd go and sell all that he had. And he had many possessions, so he went away sorrowfully. Also, Matthew chapter 16 and verse 26, what does a man profit if he should gain the whole world and lose his own soul? What shall a man give in exchange for his soul? Many times we find that people will exchange their soul for a lot less than what we think and what they think. So the importance of the soul. Verse 3 then begins with 4, and this is then a connecting word. The Greek word is gar, G-A-R, and it then connects what he's fixing to say with what he has said. For I rejoice greatly when the brethren came and testified of the truth that is in thee, even as thou walkest in the truth. Came there and testified are present participles. Came and testified are present participle, suggesting repetitive action. Brethren were always telling John of his, that is Gaius's, faithfulness. All right. You caught up? Okay. Gaius then held the truth, number one, as his own possession. Number two, he learned it. Number three, he embraced it. And number four, he put it into practice. All right. He is steadfast and true, and his life is an example of these abiding truths. So he is steadfast and true, and his life is an example of these abiding truths, or those abiding truths.
His life is what? Example?
Is an example. Now, his walking in truth is described in verses 5 and 6. Beloved, when thou dost faithfully whatsoever thou dost to the brethren and to strangers, which have borne witness of the charity before the church, whom if thou bring forward on their journey after a godly sort, thou shalt do well. So there is his walking then. It's described. It's right there. It is described in verses 5 and 6. 4 things under that. Devotion to the cause of Christ, number 1. Number 2, liberality. Number 3, hospitality. Number 4, good works.
Sounds like you'd be a good elder if you had other qualifications. Where's your husband?
All right. This is an important statement. You may see this again. Okay? This next, it is impossible to separate theory and practice in real Christianity. You may see a question about that. So, highlight that. That is a key.
Repeat it, please.
It is impossible to separate theory and practice in real Christianity. So you're going to practice what you preach. And that's what Gaius was doing. All right, verse number 4. Are you caught up yet, Ms. Dixon?
I am.
All right. She is my...
I'm his guide. His rod and his staff.
She's my governor. All right, I have no greater joy than to hear that my children walk in truth. It is implied then by this statement that Gaius was a convert of John, and he's calling him my children. That's done several times. Paul does that.
You don't think he's referring to the whole congregation?
No, I think it's just talking about that my children.
Oh, the ones he's converted.
Yes.
Okay, hang on.
And it shows what now that he's with John?
Convert, that John converted him. You know, when you've been preaching for a while, it's a joy to know that those you have led to the truth are faithful and active. And that's always a joy to your heart. Okay? All right, verse 5. Beloved, thou dost faithfully whatsoever thou dost to the brethren and to strangers. He is faithful. That means he is consistent and continuous. as the opportunities came to perform good deeds. He was known for his hospitality. This was necessary for the early church. And we find several references where brethren are urged to see after the needs of the preacher. Hebrews 13, verse 2. Remember them that are in bonds as bonds with them. That's not right. Verse 2, that was verse 3. Be not forgetful to entertain strangers, whereby some have entertained angels unawares. All right. In Romans chapter 12 and verse 13, somewhere in my New Testament, it says, distributing to the necessity of the saints, given to hospitality. 1 Peter 4 and verse 9. Use hospitality one to another without grudgingly, or grudging, without grudging. 1 Timothy 3 and verse 2. That's talking about the elders, I think, there. No, that would be the deacons. Wait a minute, 3 and verse 2. A bishop, then, that is the elders, must be blameless, a husband of one wife, vigilant, sober, good behavior, given to hospitality, apt to teach. Also, Titus 1 verse 8 would be the qualifications of an elder, lover of hospitality, lover of good men, sober, just, holy, and temperate. 1 Timothy 5:10. Well reported of her for good works, if she be brought up children, if she have lodged strangers, if she washed the saints' feet, if she relieved the afflicted, if she have diligently followed every good work. All right. So he was also taking care of strangers. This is foreigners into one's home for lodging. Abraham would be an example of this. In the Old Testament, he took those angels that came.
Foreigners in the home
And
for hospitality?
for lodging.
For lodging.
And in the Old Testament, they did bring in Lot. Was it Lot? Yes. That took the angels that came in at Sodom and Gomorrah, took them into his home. And so that's the same idea that he's talking about here. That's the background for that verse. And the way we should be too. Verse number 6. Which have borne witness of thy charity before the church, whom if thou bring forward on their journey after a godly sort, thou shalt do well. Those that have been in his home told of his kindness. And this kindness is said to be love, agape, charity, agape. And then bring forward on their journey is to help on one's journey with food, money, and arranging for companions, means of travel. There'd be several examples of this in the New Testament also. Book of Acts, Acts 15 and verse 3. And being brought on their way by the church, they passed through Phoenicia and Samaria, declaring the conversion of the Gentiles. They caused great joy to all the brethren. I think in Acts chapter 20 would be also an occasion of this. Let me find it at the end of, let's see. And watch therefore, but them which are with me. With this spoken, they knelt down and prayed with them all, and they wept and sore kissed and sorrow. They should see us. And they accompanied, verse 38, Acts chapter 20, verse 8, they accompanied him unto the ship.
What about the Good Samaritan?
Yes, you took care of him. Yes, that would be the Good Samaritan. What is that, Luke 10? Would be an example of that, where Jesus used that as an example then.
I think about in the Old Testament would be Elijah and the Shunammite woman.
Yes, that would be a good.
She took him in and she had nothing.
Yes, and even said
he blessed her, she blessed him.
Yes, even said, we have nothing, and we're going to take this, and then we're going to eat this, and we're going to die. And Elijah said, well, you fix it for me and see what happens. And that's what she did. And so therefore she was blessed.
She took care of him.
Yes.
Every time he came.
All right. So we're in 3 John. And we have thus talked about, all right. So congregations were to see after the needs of the evangelist as they traveled preaching the gospel. And I think this is what the Bible teaches we need to be doing. The man's preaching of the gospel, he needs to live of the gospel, and this would be that process. We therefore, verse 8, ought to receive such that we might be fellow helpers to the truth.
7.
We are on 6. Well, I just skipped over 6 and went on to 7.
No, you skipped over 7.
Because that was for my name's sake, they went forth, taking nothing of the Gentiles. That's support then from the church, and not taking from those who are not members of the church. All right. I think that gets into what I was talking about. The church has an obligation to help and to provide for the preachers. Verse 8, we therefore ought to receive such that we might be fellow helpers to the truth. 1 Corinthians chapter 3 and verse 9, we are laborers together with Christ, with God. We are God's husbandry. We are God's building. So we are working together. Okay. And thus, when someone supports us, they are then fellow helpers, fellow workers in the truth. They don't have to be actually out there working with us, although that is good. But they are then they are considered by God to be doing and helping then in that work, and rightfully so.
About Philippians
4.
4:15, Paul says that
No
you're
church.
the only ones that help.
Oh, no church communicated with me, but ye only. That's right, Philippians 4:15. All right. Verse number 9, but I wrote unto the church, but Diotrephes, who loveth to have the preeminence among them, receiveth us not. All right, the church as a whole was instructed to show hospitality. But Diotrephes was keeping the congregation from doing its duty. Gaius was not bullied or intimidated by him, and thus the burden of helping the visiting preachers fell upon Gaius. This preeminence is a compound word from the Greek. And it's to be fond of being first. All right, and
Say that again. Preeminence
is a compound word.
So what was the word again? I'm sorry.
Preeminence. Compound word in the Greek, and it means to be fond of being first. Let me give you a contrast. In Colossians 1:18, we find there that Christ is the head of the body of the church, who is the beginning, the firstborn from the dead, that in all things he might have the preeminence. That's not the same word in the Greek. In Colossians 1:18, that's first in rank. This word that we're talking about here is the fond of being first, when Christ is actually the first. Okay. This attitude has no place in the church and is not found in the life and teachings of Christ. Matter of fact, just the opposite of that. He taught his disciples, those 12, then when they were arguing over who's going to be first, he told them the first should be last and the last should be first. Let him that's going to be first serve the others. So this is not the attitude of a Christian. Verse number 10. Wherefore, if I come, I will remember his deeds which he doth, prating against us with malicious words. Not content therewith, neither doth he himself receive the brethren, and forbiddeth them that would, and casteth them out of the church. Now, you think about that for a moment. John said, I will remember his deeds. You think about what this man could do to Diotrephes. Okay? And he was disrupting the unity of the church. All right. So, here's what John said could happen. The writer was hoping to personally come and deal with this troublemaker. And John then gives us some attributes about Diotrephes, 4 in number. Number 1.
Hang on a minute.
Where'd you get to?
Disrupting the church.
Okay.
Now you're saying John's going to do what?
Give us 4 attributes of Diotrephes. These are negative, by the way. Number 1, he prated. Okay? Which means to babble, to accuse idly, falsely, with evil words. Number 2, he refused to receive those who came from John. Number 3, he forbade others to do their duty. Number 4, those who would not do as they were told were thrown out of the congregation.
As they're told by doctrine.
Yes. It's my way or the highway. If you don't do what I tell you to do, you're out of the congregation. We don't need that in the church, and we still have it.
Amen.
He was a servant of Satan, not of Christ.
So number 5.
No, that's just, yeah, it's just part of it. Verse number 11. Beloved, follow not that which is evil, but that which is good. He that doth good is of God. He that doth evil hath not seen God. I think there's a contrast between Gaius and Diotrephes right there in that verse. And he's telling them which one to follow. Follow Gaius. He is encourager. He is encouraged to follow a good example. He that doth good is of God, is to exhibit the way and manner of God as his offspring. To exhibit the way and manner of God as his offspring. In other words, you're just doing just like your daddy taught you to do. Hath not seen God is not to be in a relationship with God. So here's our third character. Then in verse 12, we have Gaius and we have Demetrius in beginning and the end, and Diotrephes in the middle. And we need to be like Gaius or Demetrius, not like Diotrephes. If you're like Diotrephes, you need an attitude adjustment now. Okay? Demetrius then hath a good report of all men and of the truth itself, yea, and we also bear record, and ye know that our record is true. Demetrius was well known as a good man and a follower of Christ. One could easily follow his example and find a home in heaven. What did it say in 1 Corinthians chapter 11, verse 1? I think it's verse 1. Be ye followers of me, even as I am also of Christ. So here is Demetrius then being encouraged not to lower himself to Diotrephes' level of conduct. Also Gaius, so you can put Demetrius and Gaius there, was being encouraged not to lower himself to Diotrephes' level. Verse 13, I have many things to write, but I will not with ink and pen write unto thee. Several things that John wanted to personally discuss with them. And it would be to Gaius, because that's to whom the book is written. Verse 14, but I trust I will shortly see thee, and we shall speak face to face. Peace be to thee. Our friends salute thee. Greet the friends by name. So here he is then. What John wanted to do was come to see him and speak face to face. Of course, we talked about that in verse 13. Peace then. Here is the sum of the divine blessings through Christ. Don't underestimate this. Just because it's written there at the end of it, don't underestimate the peace of God that passes all understanding. I think there's sermons that need to be preached about having that peace, just like there is grace, just like there is mercy, just like you would preach faith. So here is then the idea of peace. How do we obtain peace of God that passes all understanding? That's right. But not only through obedience, but notice what he says in this letter, that it needs to be faith in action. Okay. Yeah. Gaius had friends who were with John, and they were sending their greetings also. And then John is also relaying to Gaius his personal greetings to all his friends. So, say hi to Goober. Yeah. Just like on like they do on what is that? Mayberry AFD? What's MFD? That's not Andy Griffith Show. Y'all watch that on a regular basis, I know. You don't.
Speed dial, how about you?
All right. Now we're going to talk about Jude. Okay. Jude. Let's see. I thought I had some memory. Yes, Jude 3. Earnestly contend for the faith which was once delivered to the saints. Okay. All right. We'll have a test. I didn't mail a test today to 3rd John, did I? No, I just did 2nd John, I believe. Okay. Yeah. So I'll get one. Let's see what tomorrow is. Wednesday. I may do it tomorrow, so you can have it too. I know you got 2nd. But anyway, give you something to work on. You don't have anything else to do.
No, not at all.
Yeah. All right. So here is Jude. Jude and 2 Peter. Yes. Have a lot in common. They quote, both of them quote or reference apocryphal or pseudographical literature.
What was that second word?
Pseudographical. Pseudepigraphal. Pseudegraphical. Pseudographical. P-H-A-L. Apocryphal means they are doubtful books. Pseudographical literature is also doubtful literature. Okay. Which one you want? Apocryphal or pseudo?
Everything after they have a lot in
All right, they have quotations, a reference opposed to apocryphal and pseudographical literature. No,
Daniel.
no, those are not pseudographical. Okay, apocryphal, and what we're talking about, apocryphal is doubtful books. You know, you have
so like the Maccabees and
that's it. Okay,
all the ones that are in between the New and the Old.
that's right.
The
Apocryphal,
like the
yeah.
Catholic one.
Yes, you have several of those books.
Catholic have the book called the Apocrypha.
They are doubtful.
And their books are supposed to occur between the New
Malachi and Matthew.
Between Malachi and Matthew, they never could validate.
The reason they're doubtful is because some of their history is false. It's out and out false, and we know that from secular history. So they're called apocryphal books. And then pseudographical books are
Second and Third Maccabees.
Are also doubtful books. They're not books that are from the breath of God. If you have intertestamental period, you'll have to know that those two books, those two names.
That was during the Dark Ages, right?
No, that was before the Dark Ages.
Yeah, but it was a dark age, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. All right. We talked about the same wording and phrasing are used in both books. All right, now let's talk about the evidence of accepting this in our Bibles. The canonicity, if you want to call it that. 4, we're going to talk about 4. It's mentioned by some of the early church fathers. You understand who we're talking about when we talk about the church fathers. We're talking about men who wrote during the 2nd and 3rd centuries, who would have knowledge then of the very, they would have, like John, they would have knowledge of John. They were either John's students or students of his students. Okay, so they would have intimate knowledge with them. And so when we talk about the church fathers, we're talking about those people during that time. Okay, some of them, Clement of Rome mentions Jude. The shepherd of Hermes. Polycarp. Polycarp. You know, he's the one who said, 86 years have I served the Lord. And he was being burnt at the stake, and he said, I'm not going to give up. Barnabas. And that's not talking about the Barnabas of Acts chapter 4, 5. Barnabas, this is like the Gospel of Barnabas and that type of thing. But anyway, they make allusions to Jude. Tertullian, Tertullian.
These are people who wrote and they mentioned Jude.
Yes, knew of Jude and mention of his use of Enoch. All right.
Use of Enoch.
Enoch, Enoch. Yep. He mentions the book of Enoch. Okay, for which we know nothing. All right, Clement of Alexandria. Origen, Origen. And Didymus, Didymmus. Against, then, the canonicity. And that's Eusebius, Eusebius. He classified it among the disputed books.
Could you repeat that one more time?
What about Eusebius?
Yes, please.
All right. He classified it among the disputed books. And if you know anything about Eusebius, he then did a Greek text. And so he's well known, but he placed it there. But understand these other men. Look at the for and look at the against, and you have one against, and you have all these people for. So I'm going to go for the fors, okay?
Is that the only one you have again?
That's all. That's it. Yep. All right. Next topic is authorship. There's 3 men in the New Testament named Jude. Number 1 is Judas Iscariot. And this ain't Judas Iscariot. Number 2, Judas not Iscariot. Luke 6:16.
Judas
Not Iscariot. That's how he's referred to.
And it's Luke
6:16. Luke 6:16.
sure you weren't stuttering.
But then there's Judas, the brother of Jesus, Matthew 13:55. So guess which one? That's right. He is talked about in verse 1 as the brother of James. Guess who had a brother named James?
Jesus.
That's right. I want to be a half brother. Huh?
She was like James. Jesus.
Yeah, well, she didn't name Jesus.
I know. Well, she started off with that. So
Well, but it's still,
the Holy Spirit said, name him Jesus. And so
she
did.
just latched on to the
So
J.
she said, we latched on to the J.
All right. All right. Look at 1 Corinthians 9:5. It says, have we not power to lead about a sister or wife as well as the other apostles and as the brethren of the Lord and Cephas? So, in this class, if there's any question about it, we're going to call Jude the Lord's brother, half brother, really. Now the date. Okay. In my notes, I have anywhere from AD 60 to AD 140. We're going to hit at AD 75. It was written after 2 Peter.
So it's 60 to 75, you said?
We're going to say 75.
Okay.
So we're going to call it that, and it was written after 2 Peter. Destination. Unknown. Probably a local group of people, but we don't know for sure. He doesn't say. All right. Why did he write? Or the occasion of his writing? All right. Number one, the rise of false teachers. And that false teacher is Gnosticism. I know we talked about in 1st, 2nd, and 3rd John, but this is a different writer, so he's writing about those things. He's also writing, number 2, about some problems. Problem number 1 is covetousness. Problem number 2 is merchandising the gospel. Oh, me, don't we have that today? Merchandising the gospel. Number 3, gross immorality. Number 4, leading astray recent converts. Now, these false teachers do not seem to have separated from the church. There are some brethren who I wish would separate themselves from the church. Instead of trying to tote the church off with it, they just need to go off from the church. These men, these false teachers, were still keeping the love feast. All right, common material between 2 Peter chapter 2, or 2 Peter, yes, and Jude. All right, there's a common warning of the judgment. Peter talks about the angels who sin, the world of Noah, Sodom, Gomorrah, and Balaam.
Repeat that.
Peter talks about the angels who sinned,
No violence in it.
yeah, but what I was going to tell you to do, put Peter on one side and put Jude on the other side. If you can't do that, okay. The world of Noah, you got the world of Noah, you got Sodom, Gomorrah, and Balaam. All right, Jude talks about Israel destroyed angels.
Israel did the destroying.
Yes. He talks about Sodom and Gomorrah. He talks about Cain. He talks about Balaam. And he talks about Korah.
What was that last one? I'm sorry.
Korah, Korah. Go back to the book of Numbers and you'll read that one. All right, number 2, we have common language in the Greek. several times, and this is the key now, several times rare words are used by each. And by rare words, we mean that they're used nowhere else in the New Testament. Number 2, underneath that, the same verbs, prepositional phrases, or other constructions are used. And then other times there may be a subtle changes of the tense or the reversal of words or a slight change of wording, but it's the same statement.
What do you think there's this commonality?
Do what?
Why do we have, why are there these commonalities between the two books?
I think one, because the time that they were written
Okay.
and to whom that was written, although we are not told to whom Jude wrote. And we're not told, well, we are told who Peter wrote to. I think it's to a group of people, but I think it's also a later. And if, you know, the essential part of learning is repetition, repetition, repetition. So yes, that's another.
Because they were taught by Jesus, the same two men.
No, I don't think.
You don't think Jude was?
Yes, I think he was, but it's not that. We're going to need to stop. I went 3 minutes over. And so let's see, that will be 3. What is next? 7.
It will. 8, no 7.
All right. Thank you.
Birthday.
Bye.